Hi, and welcome to Trust No One, the XFiles podcast. In this episode, my fellow agents and I will be chatting with Ainslie S. Wiggs, who worked as an assistant location manager in the first 5 seasons of the X-Files. Welcome, Ainslie.
Thank you.
So, first question, what are your earliest memories of working on the X-Files? Like, what do you have memories of working on Deep Throat, and how did you get the job of assistant location manager on the show?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I started that show 29 years ago, so I'm pretty sure everybody here knows more about it than I actually remember. I did have to do a little refresher, and once I did, I do remember exactly how I got the job. I'll start with that. I was on my way for a job interview to be a location manager on a feature film. And Todd Pitson, who was a location manager I'd worked with on for several years as his assistant, he called me as I was in the elevator, paged me rather. This was back before cell phones. And when I called him back, he said, "Listen, I got this show. It'll take us till Christmas," which in June was a really big deal because most of the movies we did were 6 to 8 weeks worth of work. So when I went into the interview for the movie, they were all excited and said, "Yes, you have the job. We're ready to go." And I said, "Is the money in the bank?" And they said, "Well, we're working on all that." I said, "Sorry, I got a sure thing. It'll take me till Christmas." And so I called Todd back. I said, "I'm in." And little did we realize it would be Christmas 5.5 years later. So it turned out to be a really good decision on my part. As for Deep Throat, when there was the pilot that was done in March, and then Deep Throat was the first episode that we as a team, the crew, filmed. And we had no idea what we were in for, in the sense that the scripts that we were doing, Chris Carter's vision was a feature film every episode, not just regular television. So that first episode, we worked really long hours. In fact, on the Friday, which was the day that we did the big alien spaceship landing out in the field, we'd started filming during the day, and when we ran out of daylight, we were like, we hadn't finished our day, but we thought, oh, thank God, now we can go to our night shooting. And then we finished all of our night shooting, and we thought we could go home, and then we ended up picking up our day scenes that we had missed earlier. So that's when we knew that we were, we really had to rise to the occasion going forward with this show. The other memory I have is when we were filming at the house, the pilot's house. That was our first day of filming, and Chris Carter walked into the kitchen and he was eating a burrito. And I said, "I'm sorry, there's no food allowed in the house." And he looked at me and he said, "Do you know who I am?" Of course I know who you are. You're Chris Carter, the creator of the show. There's no food allowed in the house. Kindly take your burrito outside.
Oh, I think we've lost Ainsley.
Well, maybe the kitchen, but somebody will call you to set and you'll have to go in. And furthermore, as the executive producer, you should set an example. And he laughed and he went, "You're absolutely right." And he took his burrito outside, and we were friends from that moment on.
That's awesome.
What's your happiest memory then from your time on the X-Files?
Wow, there are so many. One of the really exciting things about working on that show was it's the first time any of us worked on a show that had fans. I mean, there were often times when we'd be filming in Vancouver and people would say, "Who's in it?" And we'd say, "Oh, it's Robert De Niro or Demi Moore or whoever." And people were fans of the actors in the show. This was the first opportunity where we did a show where fans loved the show. So that was a really special experience. We had an awesome crew. People always say, "Oh, we're like a family," but we really were, in the sense that we stayed together for 5 years. Pretty much the same crew the whole time. And you know how in families, maybe you don't necessarily get along with somebody, but you only have to see them at Christmas time. So you don't have to worry about it. Well, every day was Christmas dinner when you showed up for work. So even if you didn't like somebody, you had to figure out a way to get along with them. And as a result, we created some lifelong bonds of people that worked on that show together. And I met the father of my son. So I was one of, I believe, 20, he was one of 21 babies born on that show. Together on the crew.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So saying that fans, were they actually kind of involved in terms of showing up on locations? Did you have that happening?
Oh,
And-
yeah, that would happen a lot. People, it's not so much that they would track us down and find us that way, but they would see that we were filming and they would gather around and they'd want to ask questions and watch some of the filming. So we would always, find a place for people to stand and see what was going on. And if sometimes there was an opportunity where it's like, hey, can you guys just walk in the background there and, back and forth and be in the show, and they get excited about that. So that was a really fun thing.
So that actually kind of ties in with one of the questions that I had for you. When you were filming, were business owners and locals alike, were they generally receptive to you guys being in the area? I know sometimes when filming comes into an area, I'm near Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh does a lot of filming. Sometimes you have businesses that really embrace that. People love it. Other times just like, oh, traffic, who do these people think they are? What was the reception that you all had when you were filming on location?
For the most part, it was the easiest show I ever worked on when it came to scouting locations, because you'd show up and say, hi, I'm with the XFiles. It's like, come on in. So people were excited about the show. There's always going to be a challenge for businesses if you're closing the road or you're impeding pedestrian traffic. So we went out of our way to be as accommodating as we could. We had money to compensate people for lost business, and we did our best to make sure that it was a positive experience for everybody involved.
So this dovetails into one of my questions as well. I wanted to know what was the most challenging aspect of finding locations in Vancouver and around? Was it the fans knowing, or was it the the businesses? But what was that most challenging aspect for location?
Well, there were a few. Every episode, Scully and Mulder went to a different state. So we would have to try and replicate the look of a particular place that wasn't Vancouver. It was always some small American town. I think there was one episode that we actually shot that was in Vancouver. So we got to showcase it. So that was one of the challenges. The other challenge is we would be filming an entire episode in 8 days. So sometimes you'd have 3 or 4 locations that would be slated for one day. A restaurant, a church, a gym, and a flower shop, for example. So we would need to find all of those locations in an area where we didn't have to move the unit. The trucks that we traveled with were about 2.5 city blocks long, including all of our equipment and dressing rooms. So from a logistics point of view, we had to match what we had to travel with along with the locations we had to find. So it was a bit like a reverse Jenga puzzle every time we went out.
As a follow-up to that, another question I wanted to ask was, were you ever surprised, or rather, were there ever script or changes that occurred late in the process that then scuttled some of the plans for locations that you had to kind of find? Were you ever scrambling at last minute because they made changes that you were
yeah, there were some times where where a change would be made and we'd have to shuffle things. We had a huge locations department. We had 2 location managers, 2 assistant location managers, 3 scouts, plus numerous production assistants. So whenever something like that happened, we had a team of people that could change things around, and we worked very closely with the city with parking permits and things like that. So yeah, occasionally there would be, but for the most part on a show of that size, once you plan where you're going, plus you have actors coming in, so you don't always have a lot of flexibility.
Right.
So tying in with location, what you were talking about there, Agent Brad, one of the things that I know that Vancouver is notorious for is its weather. There's a lot of rain, low clouds, gray skies. I know that in many situations, that was very much the vibe that it appeared that the show was going to utilize and feed from. But were there times where it was like, we need a sunny sky, what is this? And it just completely threw things off? Like, was that ever a problem for you to find a location that you needed one thing, but it's like, yeah, this is Vancouver, ain't gonna happen?
Well, one of the things that we would do is, even on sunny days, is we would do a wet down on the pavement. So let's say we're filming a scene and it takes place downtown. 3 days later, we're filming where Scully and Mulder have driven to a location on the same day, and now we have rain. So at least because we've done the wet down on the first day that's sunny, there's weather continuity when you get to the second location 3 days later. So that's one of the things we did. You'll notice coats.
I think there's difficulty with the internet.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Okay.
I gotcha.
So we would, they were on trench coats, so it was plausible when the weather changed. There was only a couple of times where, due to snow or rain, we had issues that, we had to stop filming because the weather was too extreme. But I can think of only a couple of times.
So this is kind of just an offshoot from my original question here. I had read, and I've not been to the West Coast, I'm an East Coast person. Do you guys get a lot of snow up there? I know that sounds like a really dumb question.
It's not a dumb question. In Vancouver, we do not traditionally get a lot of snow. We don't have snow removal equipment for the city. We just wait till the next rainfall.
Oh.
So the episode where, remember, it was the circus people,
Mm-hmm.
and there was the funeral. So we showed up and it snowed overnight. So we had the special effects team out there in the greens department for 2 hours trying to get rid of the snow because it didn't suit the continuity of what we'd established.
Wow. Things you never think about.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So were that... Oh, go on, Dan.
I thought, like Lisa had asked, unfortunately she's not able to make it this time, but she'll be hosting next week's discussion. But she had asked, did the show ever have to pay extra money to get something done? She read that once they offered extra dollars to a lodge to film there after the lodge owners had initially refused.
Yeah, there were times where we would expand what we had originally negotiated as far as filming. Maybe for whatever reason, we went longer than anticipated, or we added scenes to a particular location. So it was part of the ongoing negotiations when you're doing a location agreement, which we did for every location we went to. I can't think of a time where, there was any sort of extortive behavior of we're there and no, if we want to stay, we have to pay more money. I don't think there was anything like that, but there would, if we changed the parameters, we would renegotiate for sure.
Well, on an 8-week production cycle, I can imagine that under a lot of pressure, you would want to accommodate within reason kind of any of those changes just to be able to get things done.
Yeah, 8 days, not 8 weeks. 8 days.
Days,
sorry,
yeah.
I mean, I'm just days. 8 days. 8 days.
8 weeks of luxury.
Blow it off. Find another location. Whatever. 8 days. A little tighter.
Well, that's how we started. We started with 8-day episodes. So we would prep for 8 days and then we would film for 8 days. And we would have weekends off. And then as the show got bigger and bigger, we added a second unit. So the second unit would do some of the bigger explosions and special effects, the teaser, and by I think season 2 or beginning of season 3, second unit became the same size as a regular movie unit. And what we started with, our very first crew photo from season 1, you can very clearly see everybody in it. our crew photo by season 5, everybody's got a little pinhead, and it's very to recognize without a magnifying glass, because the crew probably increased 5 times by season 5 as of what we had at the beginning.
So with that, with the crew increasing and, you know, having a separate group with them, at what point did you realize, like, wow, this is the real deal, like this is big?
So when we were filming episode 7, Ice, where they're all up in up north, at an ice station, I recall. That was in studio. So normally we'd be out on location for about 5 or 6 of the 8 days. On that particular episode, we were in the studio for 7 days. And that was when the first episode aired. And it was when we started to see on the internet the fan base building, people talking about it, the media outlets talking about the show. And that was when we started to realize that there was something really special and unique about this show. The other thing I just want to add about Chris Carter, the creator of the XFiles, Chris had such passion about the show and his ideas. And we would get a script and we'd look at it and we'd say, this has never been done before. And Chris would look at us and go, yeah, but can we?
No, I'm thinking it was probably, but you're going to do it.
Challenge accepted. So we were the very first show to do feature film type of projects on a weekly series. For example, the episode where there was a submarine going up and down through the ice, we built that in a studio. Rob Mayer, the construction coordinator, and his team literally made a submarine that went up and down inside of a building for a weekly TV show. Remember when the train blew up?
Yes.
That was before special effects were actually cost effective to do on a computer. We actually bought a Bud cart, cost $100,000, took over a section of railway just north of Vancouver, and we blew up the train.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I'm like geeking out here.
Yeah, me too.
Again, not done on weekly television.
Right. You would just think that, you know, it's a stunt or, you know, CGI, but that's awesome. That's awesome.
So time traveling back to 1983 to 1988, which were seasons 1 to 5, we did not have computers in the office. There were a few people that had a computer, but for example, in the locations department, every time my boss needed something written out, he would handwrite it. I would take it to the production coordinator, stand over her and interpret all of his handwriting, and she would type it on a typewriter for it to be published. So when we discovered that we could actually take photos and send them through a computer down to LA to the studio, it was like a chorus of angels singing in the office. That was unheard of technology. Also, we shot everything on film, whether, you know, when we were scouting locations, and somebody came to our office and said, and showed us a digital camera, and it was $2,500, and we were all, that'll never fly. And we didn't use it. We stayed with film because, you know, the transition to computers and digital just hadn't happened yet.
Well, I wonder if you'd like fax each other call sheets and stuff like that.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
I wondered if you would like fax each other call sheets and stuff like that.
Yeah, we would.
Yeah.
Well, we would print them for sure.
Oh,
we
right.
would. During the first assistant or the second assistant director who wrote out the call sheet would do it by hand, and it would be printed, and it would go to the production office, and it would be typed up there, and then it would be copied and distributed. So it was a big deal. And often if we were on location and we were an hour away from the office, I would have to find a place that could print the call sheets for us.
Wow.
Guessing it's a little bit different today.
Now we do it digitally. We try to be as green as possible on production. So a lot of the paperwork that we used to have to do is now replaced by electronics. I took a break from the industry for a couple of years, and my kids were, needed me at home a bit more. So when I got back into it, I showed up at the production office and I had my XFiles binder and it was all fancy and I was ready to have all my paperwork. And the production coordinator looked at me and goes, "Yeah, it'll be on your computer." And that was it. It's like, oh, everything's on my computer or my phone now. So gone are the days where you even need a binder.
So what was the effect then, comparing your pre-tech times to the post introduction of tech, right? How would you describe, or what would you say would be the biggest difference between those two types of productions?
Time. So the amount of time that we spent printing and photocopying and distributing schedules, because everything had to be put down into like we call a one-liner, which would break down what we would be shooting each day. Then we'd have a shooting schedule, which would list every single prop and set dressing and actor in a scene. So there was a huge amount of paperwork that we would share so that everybody could look at what they specifically needed to provide. And every time that paperwork was revised, it changed color. So that way, you had a blue one-liner and then you got a pink one. You knew to throw out the blue one. So by having everything digitized, it just made it a lot faster to get information and to share information.
Did that lend itself to more efficient or better production? The speed?
I would say that the quality of the production didn't change as a result of that, but certainly the speed with which we were able to get information out. And also shows now, because of the technology, it used to be that we would spend, let's say for a movie of the week, we would spend 4 weeks prepping that. Now we prep those things in 10 days. And instead of, now that we're doing, we're not using film anymore, everything is on SD cards, then instead of spending 4 weeks filming or 6 weeks filming, we're making the movies that you see on the Hallmark channels and your movies of the week, they're shot in between 12 and 15 days, generally speaking.
So everything speeds up, reducing costs. Okay.
Do you feel anything is lost in that though, Ainslie, with the speeding up of the process? Or is it just more efficient and therefore better?
I think it's more efficient. Plus, back when we started, there were 3 networks, and now there's 400 to 800 when you start counting all the different streaming services and other options to watch content. So I think that you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't have everything digitized.
Well, and sorry, I was just going to say, because we have more networks, more companies producing content, I imagine that would mean that you are working with a greater number of people every year, or number of companies every year, or you're able to work on more projects every year, right? So it just everything keeps getting busier and more engaging.
Yeah, and the cost has come down significantly to make the content. So a movie of the week that let's say 1988 would cost you $4 million US to do, and it would take you a total of 8 weeks from start to finish, just in the city that you're filming in. That's now happening in 20 days, and their content's being produced for under $1 million Canadian.
Wow. So do you think if the XFiles was released today, then it would have the same impact? Or do you think it sort of hits a sweet spot in terms of the era that it was in, and like you said, the rise of the internet and various other factors?
I think that if it was introduced today, it would be just another show. I think the fact that when it was introduced, and you're right, it did hit a sweet spot for sure with the internet and people that, stayed home on Friday nights to watch TV. That was a big deal because you couldn't see it any other way. You had to be there. So I think if it came out today, that a lot of the effects would be digital and wouldn't have the same kind of weight that they did back when we were, going to a real sewage treatment plant to watch flukemen swim. So yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and I don't think it would be the same show today as it was back in 1993.
Well, kind of segueing from your sewage plant comment there, what was your favorite location that you guys got to shoot on, and why did you like that one so much? And then conversely, what was your least favorite and why?
I used to love filming. Well, I love filming at the forest. The Greater Vancouver watershed was just up the street from the studio. I lived sort of between the forest and the studio, so that was really handy for me to go up there. My favorite places to film were houses and being in neighborhoods and meeting the neighbors and having them come out, and you'd be standing out in the rain and they'd say, "Oh, come in and have a cup of tea," and things like that. It was really fun to meet all the neighbors. So I really enjoyed filming in houses, and we got to film in a lot of really cool places. It was fun filming at the Hotel Vancouver because we'd take over the whole floor with all the fanciest suites. As for least favorite, well, you can guess the open sewage treatment plant was right up there. It was fascinating on one hand, but it was really horrific. And it was a super hot day in August. And while we were filming there, something inexplicable happened, and alarms were going off, and nobody would talk to us because what we were doing was, nothing compared to whatever crisis they had to manage. So it was kind of weird that this inexplicable thing happened while we were filming there. But that, and then we also filmed in an abattoir where, you guys would be able to figure out the episode faster than I could, but there were hanging cow carcasses everywhere. And we actually said to the caterers that day, "Let's just go vegetarian." on the table. So as gross as those places were to be in, they were also kind of fascinating and educational.
Right. It's an experience in and of itself. So I'm sure you can find the positive in that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Were there any locations that really creeped you out then, that just had a weird feel about, or a strange vibe? Given the nature of the show, it's kind of inevitable, right? But yeah, what do you think?
Well, there was a former mental institution called Riverview that is very popular for filming. And one night I had to wait until all the trucks were gone, and I was inside the building, and there's ghosts there, and people have seen all kinds of strange things. And I was sitting there in the dark, and I was reading a script because there were no actual lights there. You had to bring in the light, whatever lights we used for filming. So I had a script with me, and I was just waiting for them to pull all the trucks up, and I got so engrossed in the script that I was reading with my flashlight. And then when I was done, I suddenly realized everyone was gone. All the trucks were gone. And here I am in this incredibly creepy, eerie, dark place that I was, I think, the second or third floor in, and I had to find my way out. And it was like 3:00 in the morning. So that was definitely a very creepy place. But for the most part, all the locations that we went to, even if they were a little bit eerie, we were there with, 150 people. So it just didn't have the same kind of impact.
What was, you mentioned that after the first couple of episodes in the can, so to speak, you started seeing a lot of the the fan base or the growing fan base of the series, was there at what point during your time on those first few seasons did you say, did you start thinking about why it was so popular? You know, you started to think that there was a specific, what was it that was touching the minds or the hearts of the fans?
Well, I think it was part of it was the fact that they could talk to each other through the internet, through chat groups and fan clubs that they had going. So that was part of it, that they could communicate with each other. It was also a really unique concept on TV at that time. And then there was the chemistry between Scully and Mulder. And there was the fact that, you know, we did go to some really diverse locations, and our scripts were really, really well written. So I think all of those things contributed to the fact that it was a really unique show at a really unique time.
What did you find was the best thing about the job then at the time? I mean, it's a while back, isn't it? But reflecting on it, what were the bits that you kind of miss now?
Well, it was a learning experience. I've never worked harder in my life, and it was the best job that I ever had. The people, as I mentioned, the crew, that made it a really memorable experience. And that kind of chemistry is really, really rare to find. The friendships that I made on that, I don't know if you've seen my Facebook page, but my entire team was like, don't forget to mention us when you're on your podcast. If you want to know who they are, their names are all there. So yeah, I mean, lifelong friendships. And to be honest with you, if I never do anything else in my career, I can say I worked on the XFiles.
Awesome. What were your criteria for allocation?
Well, so first of all, when we get the script, we figure out what we're looking for. We work closely with the production designer and the art department to see what they want. We talk to the directors, get their vision. And we were lucky on the XFiles that we had the same group of directors, so we got to know them really, really well. So we would see what was required visually, and then it was a question of access and accessibility. So if you're shooting something, was it Darkness Falls that we were in a forest up a hill? Forests look largely the same, whether it's right off the parking lot or you hike 300 meters in. So it was a question of finding something that was close and accessible, not rappelling down a cliff and saying, here's the perfect shot. As I mentioned, we had a huge unit that we traveled with, so it had to be where we could park things close enough that we could function and work. And then there were things to consider, like sound. So if you find the perfect house, but it's next to the airport and you're under a flight path, then that's going to cause you a lot of delays.
Yeah.
And so there was sound, there was the visual. It was just sort of a combination of what's going to make it work for every aspect of the show. And because we had such a great team of location scouts, we had files and files and files of locations just waiting, you know, places that we'd come across or interesting abandoned buildings. So we had a library, a huge library of locations that we could share with the production team and build some scripts around those themselves.
Linking into that idea, I mean, a lot of the episodes, you know, feature reservation lands and, you know, First Nation or Native American peoples. You know, were those sort of authentic locations, or did you have to kind of have a bit of desert and, you know, kind of make it look like a reservation land? Because that's obviously a really charged issue and a really important one today.
It's much more so today than it was back then. here in Canada, we recognize the unceded territory that we're on. If we're opening a meeting or at the beginning of a play at the National Arts Centre, it's something that we talk about a lot now that we didn't back then. Most of the land that we did film on for the XFiles would be considered unceded territory. As far as the reservation, I think you might be talking about the time we went to the quarry pit, and where we had the guys on dirt bikes going through a quarry that we painted red. So that was something we created to look like a reservation land. And then we sent the motion control camera down to, I believe it was New Mexico, to film the wider shots. And then we brought the motion control camera back, and a motion control camera would, once you programmed in the settings of how the camera would move, it would do the exact same thing in both locations, so you could weave the shots together.
Wow.
If you could film in any location in the world then, so no budget, well, endless budget, the opposite really, isn't it? There's no budget at all, you just got to figure it out. Endless budget, you can go anywhere you want. Where would you want to film and why?
I would love to go to Budapest and film there. I actually have a very close friend who's filming there right now. And just from what I've seen in movies, it just looks like a spectacular city. And I would say pretty much anywhere in old Europe, I would love to go and film and explore because of the architecture. Barcelona has amazing architecture, and Paris has amazing architecture. I think logistically, a lot of those places are a challenge because those streets are designed for film unit trucks, but if you have an unlimited budget, then it's easy to make it happen, as we've all seen by watching shows filmed there.
You said this was one of the best experiences that you had. Is it because of the camaraderie and the crew and just how you had personal relationships with the people you're working with, or was it because of the production side, the kinds of things that they were doing creatively, or a mix of both?
Oh, it's definitely a mix of both. As I mentioned, I met my son's father on the show, but creatively, it was unprecedented. And so that was really exciting to be a part of. And that combined with the camaraderie, I mean, to work the kind of hours that we worked, literally in the trenches at times, in the pouring rain in the middle of the night, because that's when aliens show up. That you have to love what you're doing. I once stood for 23 hours in the pouring rain, and in a jacket that I was told was waterproof but wasn't, but it was incredibly warm. So it was like wearing a giant sponge for 23 hours. And, if you don't love what you're doing, then you just can't sustain that kind of work. So the camaraderie and the production opportunities really were what made the show special. And as I mentioned before, the fact that I can go anywhere in the world and there's an X-Files fan, and that's really exciting. There's a story I wanted to share with you. When we were filming in Vancouver one year, it was right before Christmas, this girl came up to me and she said, I'm from Australia. I'm here visiting some family. My 15-year-old sister, Rain, has brain cancer and she's not doing very well. And the X-Files is her favorite show. She lives for, my parents bringing in the tapes to the hospital. Do you think I could get an autographed photo? I said, absolutely. So David and Jillian did a personalized autograph photo to her. I gave it to Rain's sister and she took it back to Australia. A few weeks later, I got a letter from Rain's mother that to this day I carry with me and with my work stuff. And she wrote this beautiful letter about how, for the first time in all of her treatment, Rain suddenly had a spark and the will to fight to beat the cancer, all because we had reached out to her from the X-Files. So then Rain's mother made arrangements for Rain. She started to get better, and they arranged for her to come and see the same family members in BC. And we brought her to set, and she got to be on camera, and she got to hang out with David and Jillian and all the crew. And then she went back to Australia, and I lost touch, although with this podcast,
She'll be back.
Yeah.
never imagined.
Oh, sorry, we lost you.
You
You
lost
said with
me.
this podcast. You said with this podcast, and then we lost the signal.
So maybe with this podcast, somebody knows of Rain Bazile in Australia. She was 15 back in the 90s, and she had brain cancer. Anyway, I have never imagined working on a show where we could affect somebody's life that way. That was magical to know that our TV show, the place where we just showed up to go to work every day, had that kind of impact on someone's life.
Wow.
That's a beautiful story. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really very moving, and it's and I think it kind of taps deep into why people love the show, because actually the passion within the team, the passion within the performances was so vivid and so visceral, and it's all about hope, and it's all about truth, and actually to keep going and to keep fighting, and no matter how many knocks you get up and you keep going, because you know that ultimately you're fighting for the right thing. And that's a kind of moral truth that I think, you know, permeates the fan community, and, you know, gives lots of kind of hope to lots of people to pursue their passions and pursue what really is out there and what really is possible. And I think that story just taps into that so beautifully. Thank you for sharing that.
No, my pleasure.
I wondered if you wanted to share the story of your jumper.
Oh, can you see it?
Yeah.
So I think it says 4th year on it. So every year at the end of the season, we would get a sweatshirt or a jumper or something. So the very first year, we got one, and it had a card that said, "May we all have 5 of these." It was from Chris Carter. And we did. We all ended up with 5 of them. But they would give us jackets and umbrellas and, you know, all kinds of coffee mugs. We had all kinds of stuff with the X-Files logo on it that were gifts from the producers. They were very, very appreciative.
Was that jacket actually waterproof, Ainsley?
It was. No, one year we all ordered, the entire crew ordered these big, thick jackets from a company called Snow Goose here in Canada. They were supposed to be warm, and they were all supposed to be waterproofed. Mine was red because I did traffic control and I needed to stand out. Everybody else got black ones because they all needed to blend into the background. So I was the first one on set that day, and I put on my jacket and realized within half an hour it wasn't waterproof. So I told everybody, "Don't put your jacket on, it's not waterproof." And it turned out all the black ones were waterproof, but not the red one. So I ended up wearing, because we did a lot of work with the U.S. military, they would send us up proper U.S. military clothing. So I would wear a big jacket, the camouflage jacket, which could sustain the rain. And then I wore yellow fishing overalls and a big black sou'wester hat. I looked ridiculous, but I was generally warm and dry.
Wow. What was it like working with the military?
Well, I didn't work with them directly. We would order things from them. From the props department, and the costume department would ship them up. When we were doing scenes that required house of the pilot. We used actual military personnel. We would bring them in as background actors because you can't teach that sort of stuff. You know, those moves. It would look ridiculous if we tried to get people to sort of sneak around that weren't trained in it. And Chris Carter was very, very concerned that everything we did looked legitimate because he said somebody at home does this for a living and they're going to watch this and they're going to think we don't know what we're doing. So he was really, really on top of making sure that we had everything just so.
It does look like as they went through to, you know, put things together and make sure everything was detailed. He obviously, I don't know him, you worked with him. He's extremely detail oriented and he would want to fact check anything that he did. And I think that's something a lot of people can appreciate. Having watched the series as a kid, you know, you don't really look at details like that, but as an adult, rewatching it a couple of times, you can really appreciate things like tiny details that most people aren't going to notice, but then you look at them and you're like, okay, that's really cool that they did that. And I think that made a huge difference in the quality of the work. And I know for me, that's one of the things I really enjoyed.
Well, I remember there was a speaker who was done a lot of research on Roswell and the ship that crashed there when a lot of the documents were released. So he came to lecture at UBC on a Saturday, and I went with one other crew member just because we were really interested. We were just starting the show, and Chris Carter walked in, and he had also come to see this person talk. And he tried to be as up on everything as he possibly could to make sure that we were authentic.
If the X-Files was being filmed today, then what kind of conspiracies and issues do you think we'd be picking up on, right?
Well, I think there would be a plethora of them, and I don't think that they would have the same impact as they did 29 years ago because we weren't talking about this. You remember there was an X-Files episode with a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, you know, and then all the government conspiracies that are now a lot more. I think people look at them now as if, there might be a grain of truth to a lot of these things. That they, not so much that they actively necessarily believe them, but they wouldn't be surprised if they found out they were true. So I
think conspiracy now is much more commonplace with a lot of QAnon and a lot of different groups that have over the last several years planted seeds online. Online has been a boon for a lot of things, but also a bit of a bane to society as well. So I think X-Files was just unique enough at the time to capture people's interests. But I think you're right. If it had the same type of production focus today, it would just be one of a half dozen or a dozen shows that are dealing with some similar issues.
Right.
It would fade into the background a bit more.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So a couple of us have been wondering whether you have like any personal belief in like the existence of extraterrestrials and or like Bigfoot or
Agent Dan, you should have said it in the Mulder voice. Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials? That was a terrible imitation.
Does that answer your question?
Now
That's
we know
awesome.
where they are. That's so good, Ainsley. Thank you.
I would not be surprised if there are. You know, I think it's naive to believe we are the only ones out there. I haven't done a lot, aside from working on the show, to be honest with you, I haven't really done a lot of research into it. Somebody asked me if I believe in Bigfoot. Well, I have 3 boys over 6'2", so if you saw the size of the shoes in my hallway, you would believe in Bigfoot as well. So I think that, you know, there's so many possibilities out there that, you know, if I found out it was true, I wouldn't be surprised.
What was
So-
the strangest creature you encountered during your time on the X-Files?
Well, only the ones that we made. So, you know, the makeup for and the prosthetics for the episode Home were pretty graphic, not just on camera but also in person. When that script hit our desk, we read it and we looked at each other and said, "There is no way Standards and Practices is going to let us do this." That was sort of the policing agent for the networks back then. You couldn't have a dead body with eyes that were open. You couldn't have anybody smoking on camera. All these other rules. So the whole, you know, incestuous amputated mother under the bed thing, we just didn't think that would fly. And it turned out to be one of the biggest episodes that we ever did.
Interesting piece of information about the not the location, but the setting for that one. Home, Pennsylvania is only about 10 miles north of where I went to college.
Well, and a lot of the scripts that we did were pulled from things that were current in the entertainment industry or in the media. Or, for example, my boyfriend and I were watching the movie Contagion in the theater with Dustin Hoffman, and jokingly, we both worked on the show. The future. Monday.
Sorry, the internet dropped out. It's still dropping out.
Oh,
Okay, you're back.
what part did you?
You were in the theater with your boyfriend.
Oh, so we were in the theater. We were watching the movie Contagion, and on Monday, we joked that we were going to end up shooting that as an episode. And on Monday, the scripts were on our desk. So
Wow.
they did pull things that were, you know, current.
So have you had I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, Agent Michaels.
I wanted to know, have you watched the series in its entirety? I think it broke up there.
Can you
I
hear
didn't
me?
hear what you said.
I have watched the entire series up to the end of season 9.
And what would you say is your favorite episode?
Well, I had to look this up because I figured you'd ask me it. Triangle.
Oh, cool.
So Triangle was the episode that was done. Alfred Hitchcock had done a movie where it was seamless. There were no cuts. It was just transitions. And so they did that for the episode Triangle, where they're in the Bermuda Triangle and they're filming on the Queen Mary. So I thought, I love many episodes for different reasons, but that one I found from a production point of view to be one of the most interesting.
And how did you get into your sort of line of work? Was it something you knew a lot about going into, or was it a kind of?
Well, I'd always, from the time I was 5 years old, wanted to work in, at the time, theater, because that's what I was exposed to all through school. I was involved in musical theater and plays. And then when I finished high school, I took marketing in college because my mother convinced me I needed a real job, not just arts. And then so I did that for 2 years, and then I worked at Expo 86, which was a big international fair here in Vancouver. And after that, I just started doing work in theater and making absolutely no money, but loving it. And then the film industry started to take off. In 1988, I got a call from a friend of mine saying, they're making movies here. I need people. Come back. I was in Ottawa at the time, and she said, come back to Vancouver. And so I did, and I started working in the production office. And then I worked on location as an assistant director, as well as working in the locations department. And it just was one show after another. It was steady work. It was exciting. It was big movies being made. And that's how I got into the business, and I've been doing it for 34 years.
So when you originally kind of got your way into it, was location management kind of a thought of what you wanted to do? Did you know that was even a thing? It just kind of happened?
Yeah, I didn't
Or
know that. I didn't know that was a thing. So
Okay.
until I started in the business, and then I thought, this is the best job ever. You're constantly doing new things. You get to meet all kinds of fascinating people. It opens doorways to, places you never thought that you could get into. And when my kids were 16, I started taking them around with me. And one of my boys was like, I never knew this was really a job. And he now is working in the film industry. He just fell in love with it the way that I did.
So you had said that was something that you had thought that you had wanted to do, was work in that industry. In your mind, what was it that you wanted to do? I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to work in the film industry. I'm going to be a cameraman. I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to do this. What was it that you had in mind?
Well, originally I had planned to be, I wanted to go into acting. That's what I studied, and I did musical theater and plays. However, my mother, I think, snuck into my room at night and whispered in my ear, "Theater is a hobby, not a career." So I thought, well, I have to find something else. I mean, this is something I can always do for fun. I need to find a real job. And then when my friend Colleen said, come back to Vancouver, we need people, I realized, okay, I could have the best of both worlds. So
that's awesome that it just kind of fell into place like that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone that was looking to kind of start off in that industry today? Because it's a very different world, isn't it?
Well, actually, right now, the one thing that we lack are people. So I'm currently working in Ottawa. I'm a production manager. So I find people to work on the shows. And I'm literally hiring people straight out of film school to come and work on movies because, where I live, we're a smaller production center. A lot of people, once they learn a bit about their trade, they head off to Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver and work on the bigger shows. And even those cities are looking for people. That's why they're coming after, the people that are learning from us. So right now is an awesome time to get into film and television, pretty much anywhere in the world. And I know in the States and Canada, and I assume it's the same in other places, every city has some kind of film office that deals with permits, or if it's a bigger place where they have more productions, they might have a film commissioner that does marketing and promotion. So that's a really great place to start if it's something that somebody's interested in doing. That would be the first step for somebody to say, okay, well, these are the different companies in town, or these are the schools that you can go to. But everyone I talk to right now, they're looking for people.
Well, if you have any contact information for people in Calgary, Alberta, if you're pass that along.
Calgary has a film office. They have a film commissioner. So
when we went live, there was a comment and a question from a fan.
Oh my God.
What's the answer?
The answer was yes. Next question.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ainslie, for joining us for this discussion. It's been absolutely wonderful. It's been great to speak with you. Thanks also to the panelists for joining. And we hope you've enjoyed it, to the viewers.
Oh, I have. Thank you so much for having me. And I have so many notes. I wanted to be really well prepared. So, if there's another opportunity, I'd be happy to come back.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
That'd be amazing.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, please remember to like and subscribe to this video, and we'll see you next time. The truth is out there.
Bye.
Bye.